All right, all right. Welcome back to another episode of the Behind the Back podcast. We are your hosts. I am Marcos Conan Negron, and beside me here, as always, is Ben the Jet Retz. Ben, how are you, my brother?
Dude, I got a setup behind me. Can we appreciate all this?
Yes, I know. Dapped out in the Kings gear. I love it, dude.
Yes, sir. I realized we hit a point where we went to our year mark just about, and I'm like, I still don't have like a consistent background that I can count on. And so yeah, I went out and I got mainly just the flag. I already had some of this stuff, but I picked up this flag and yeah, I love it, dude. It's
I know.
everything I needed and more.
It looks sick, dude. I love it. So, as you guys can see, last week we were discussing football and all the fun news that we weren't hearing about it, and we realized we were going to run into the same problem again this week. So, we decided that we'll push off what we had in mind for this week to next week. So next week we'll be channeling some football, but we got some NBA news. The NBA schedule released for all 30 teams out here, all 32 teams, sorry, and we thought it'd be a great time to talk Kings and talk our schedule and take a look at any trends that we've noticed, the strength of schedule, all that fun stuff. Let our schedule nerds, selves go crazy and kind of see what kind of goals we have now that we see the schedule in front of us. So let's talk the schedule. Let me bring that up real quick. So we got a very fun schedule ahead of us. So Ben, let me give it off to you here. Any trends that we noticed before we start really diving in, like kind of week to week here?
Yeah, so honestly, let me start with opening night. Opening night is a game against Minnesota, which is not a pushover team. This was a team that made it to the Western Conference Finals. So what a way for the Sacramento Kings to start their season playing against a team who is already kind of established. And I can't believe I'm saying that Minnesota is established, but they are, with
Mm-hmm.
Anthony Edwards, Karl Anthony Towns, Rudy Gobert, with just a really well-built team in a lot of ways. So this is a great chance for the Kings to come out and smack them in the face and make some noise early. I think this is a great way to really get a sense of where this team is at very early on and hopefully run with it from there. But looking at the next games after that, you got the Lakers, which is the very next game in LA, and obviously as a Kings fan and as a organization, we hate the Lakers, and so another great opportunity to kind of get some motivation and get some confidence going, especially if you can go into LA and get a big win. So
Yeah.
love those first two games.
Yeah, I think it's a great way. Like you said, this is a new look team now. And for those, who have been under a rock this whole summer, obviously the Kings have signed DeMar DeRozan to this team. They drafted Devin Carter, but he's going to be out to start the season. But they've made moves and they kept Malik Monk. Like the Kings offseason has been dubbed a success in a lot of the Kings fans, at least eyes. The media might have another perspective, but for us, these two games are a great chance to just come out here and flex our muscles right away and say, hey, we're going to be a legit team. And obviously it's early. Nothing, you could fumble the first week and still recover and everything like that. But given when we're talking about the schedule, we're going to look at stretches and we're going to be like, wow, this might be a tough stretch. But then if you look all around the league and all of these other schedules, the NBA in general has just gotten tough. Like there's not going to be any easy games. There's not going to be any legitimately easy stretches. We're going to earn every win. And this is something that hopefully with the addition of DeMar, that veteran presence who's capable of elevating this team and adding a new wrinkle, we might be better positioned. So again, great start to the season with Minnesota and LA before we do get, a relatively easy pairing of back to back with Portland and Utah. But that's another thing. How many back to backs do we have this year, Ben?
Too many, Marcos. We're looking at 16 back-to-backs,
Mm-hmm.
which is a league high. We're tied with a bunch of other teams for it. But there's something that kind of frustrates me about that. Last year, the Kings led in the most back-to-backs as well. They had 15 last year. This year, they got 16. Well, our great rivals in LA, they have 13, which is a league low. And
Of
I'm
course.
continuing to see this trend where the Lakers, I'm going to say the F word, Marcos.
What? No. What do you mean?
I'm going to say the F word.
The F? No. Don't do that. Don't do that.
Favoritism. The NBA favors the Lakers like crazy.
I
And
mean,
it's,
yeah,
look, with the back-to-backs, it's LeBron's getting older. Anthony Davis is, other than last year, struggles to stay on the court. And so obviously for the Lakers to be in the playoffs, that ups TV, ratings, that ups money. Like everything's good and gravy when the Lakers are in the playoffs and making a run. So I'm not saying that they're going to throw games to get the Lakers in there, but to give them 13 games of back-to-backs, like, yeah, that gives them an advantage, because that's really a 6-game advantage on everybody else. So it's frustrating to see that for sure. But
yeah,
with this Kings team, what they did on the back-to-backs last year, they did end up figuring it out. We didn't win one for a minute.
yeah.
Like, you remember that stretch. It seemed like we couldn't pull the lid off the basket when it came to a back-to-back, second out of a back-to-back for
Hmm.
a while. And then we finally did. I don't have that number to what we actually, how many of those we actually won. However, I do know that they started to figure out the back-to-backs and how to, at least figure out a win at that point. So that's going to be key in this. I do want to point out, though, so the first 11 games, we're outside of Sacramento for 7 of those.
Yeah.
That's massive. That's something that we got to keep in mind, especially because 2 of those, you go from Atlanta to Toronto, like on a back-to-back. And that's going to be tough in and of itself. Early on in the season, having a back-to-back that early, let alone a back-to-back going from Atlanta to Toronto. I know it's not a crazy flight, but it's a flight nonetheless.
Hmm.
And it's something you got to get up for the next day. And so I'm looking at the 7 games being away from home in the first 11, and I'm like, man, we really got to come out and make a lot of noise in that Minnesota game, because you gotta find that like confidence early on that you can kind of run with the rest of the time in this early stretch.
Yeah, there's especially if we start strong in Minnesota, like at home against Minnesota. You're right. If we take that first game, there's a real possibility we could walk away almost 6-0 if we really think about it realistically speaking, because we've had the Lakers numbers the past 2 years, and I'm Atlanta and Toronto is going to be an interesting back to back. Obviously, number one pick is hiding down over there. However, Trae Young's going to end up feeling. Then Toronto's in the process of rebuilding, adding pieces. They got a bunch of trades. We'll be seeing Davion for the first time since he's got traded. There's going to be a lot of fun storylines this year, but it isn't. I think it's important that we're going on the road a lot to start, and no game is, like I said, no game's going to be a piece of cake. There's a lot of teams with a lot to prove this year, so it's going to be interesting when you go from Atlanta to Toronto, and then we got Miami following Monday, and then you hit up Toronto again. So we got our whole series with Toronto out of the way within the first 3 weeks of the season. And then one thing when we talk about the back to backs, I'm noticing early on, just we got the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 sets of back to back from the beginning of the season all the way through December. Like that's going to be a lot of back to backs in really crucial spots, because if we can win a few of those early on, we are going to be really set up to kind of balance out the rest of the season. And you said we had 16. If we're getting 6 of them out of the way in the first month and a half, I think that'll eventually benefit us in the long run.
Yeah, and especially because the back half of our schedule seems to be a little more aggressive than the front end. So to get those out of the way would be massive. I'm looking at November 10th through the 16th. We start the 10th and 11th on a back-to-back. Then we have a day off, play Phoenix at home on the 13th, a day off, and then we start a back-to-back, first game being the in-season tourney against Minnesota, and then the next night with Utah. Like, that's a lot of basketball in a 7-day stretch. That's 5 games in 7 days. Dude, NBA, these schedule makers got to do better, man. This is just mean.
I know, and the funny part is that's not even going to be the first time that we run into this kind of series
No.
where we're running. We'll notice it as we continue on, but we're going to have 5 games in 7 nights a few times this season, and that's just, we've talked about this before. Like I've been very huge on it. Again, you play who you play on a nightly basis, but rest is huge, and it's kind of, when we look at this schedule from, it was positiveresidual.com. They had a This is where a lot of people have been pulling the statistics, a little logistics from the schedule, little trends that you see.
Yeah.
And they marked the Kings as the tied for the 11th hardest schedule in the NBA, but in the Western Conference, it's tied for the fifth easiest.
Mhm.
So in the West, it's going to be just, they think it's going to be a gauntlet this year again. They think it's going to rise and be a lot tougher than it was last year. And last year was already tough and crazy to begin with. So when you when we pair this in that week alone, that when we go to the 5 and 7 nights, we got Phoenix twice, San Antonio, and that'll be interesting. We get to see HB and Chris Paul pair up with Wemby. Then we got the Minnesota game again, and then Utah. So that'll be, when we look at some of these games, we got to hope that in these stretches, in these weeks, that we really win at least 3 or 4 of those games. And when we play those 5 game stretches, if we want to really just consistently stay good, if we're in a position, if in the West, if we drop 4 games in a row, we're gonna have to claw our way back into the standings, because there's going to be a realistic chance that we just fall if we struggle at any point this year. But with that being said, I also just don't know if that's going to be the case. And we're going to dive into it a little later on what our expectations are for this team. And just because we see the schedule, it's easy when you're just looking at this schedule alone and not comparing it to others side by side. It's going to look daunting. But as we go through the season, and as you and I break down each and every game as we go along, we'll see which advantages teams have, which advantages we have, and it's I think it'll balance itself out nicely, because after this 5 and 7 nights, then we just get 2 games the following week against Atlanta, and then the Clippers in an in-season tourney game. And I think those are 2 very winnable games where the guys can rest and recover before going on another back-to-back versus Brooklyn and OKC. So I think we're set up early where even if we're playing a lot of games, they're against teams that we have a really good chance against.
Definitely. So I'm looking at December right now, and just a little bit that you have up, there's a lot of purple in there. And there's something I want to talk about there. So for the holidays, the Sacramento Kings are going to be home.
It's
We've
true.
got a large amount of home games during the months of December and January. And that's going to be kind of crucial for us, because that's a vital time of the year where at that point your team is starting to really find its groove, whether it's a negative or a positive groove, right? That early part of December is like, basketball is kind of, it's in its prime at that point. The season is in its prime. And so the Sacramento Kings are who we believe, you and I believe, and what the fans believe they are. This team should be cooking at this point. And if there's something that the Sacramento Kings have needed to do better in the last 2 seasons, it's take care of that home court advantage.
For sure.
And what better time to do it than in the months of December and January, where you can really position yourself going into the later parts of the season, where that schedule is just going to get a little bit tougher as it goes. And I'm really looking at December and January as probably the most vital part of the Kings stretch throughout this season.
And something needs to be said too about that, we might get a little bit of rest, and maybe not, because we have expectations for this team. Obviously, you see that right in the middle of December is where the NBA Cup, that in-season tournament, that's where the elimination games start happening. And if the Kings position themselves in here, that's going to be great. And we'll see what happens. We made it to the elimination stage last year before getting knocked out by New Orleans, but there we got tough matchups this year in the in-season tournament, but I also think there's a realistic chance that we could come out of our group again. But if for some reason the worst happens and we don't, and we just we fumble, and we just lose these in-season games but still maintain a good record, there's a chance that this team's going to get some rest during the holiday season too. And um, that might help us in the long run too, because we saw what happened with the top 2 teams in the in-season tournament last year. It didn't pan out the way it was supposed to. It's great early on, it was super competitive, super fun, I'm excited for it this year, but this is just an incentive for the players. It doesn't affect the overall goal. So that'll be something that to monitor, especially in December.
Yeah, it would definitely be a statement for Kings fans though, and I think we'd be pretty hyped to say that we won the NBA Cup. But um, another thing I'm noticing with this schedule is the amount of Lakers games that we have in the early stages of this schedule. And I think by game 32, we've played the Lakers every time this year. And that's kind of
Yeah.
frustrating. Because that happened almost last year. It felt like we played the Lakers and the Warriors like really early on in the season, especially the Warriors. And then it was like nothing the rest of the season.
Right.
I personally don't like that when you can't see a team at different stages in the season, because teams look a lot different as the year goes on, whether it be injuries or just how they're playing together, like whatever the case may be. There are different stages to a team throughout the season all the time.
Yeah.
And so to play the Lakers in basically the front third of the season and not see them the rest of the time, I mean, I hope that we win all four, right? I think we have a great shot at winning all
Yeah.
four, but it's frustrating from that perspective because it's like, what if someone's injured that we could really use out there? What if, X, Y, or Z, and it's like we don't get to see what that looks like. And so I I personally don't like that. I feel like it should be spread out more. But I kind of get it. I am noticing too, like I think at least one of those matchups against the Lakers is a back to back, which it just kind of figures, right?
Yeah.
Like, of course, we're on a back to back against them,
No, I just think it's interesting though. And another point to that too is so much can change after the first third of the season because the trade deadline comes. The Lakers are
right?
usually one of the names that are in there. Did that happen last year? No, but they're in a position where they might be desperate enough because they might not be fielding the talent that, they weren't able to gather in during the offseason. The Kings were able to make moves in the offseason, so now maybe we won't have to worry about that as much. Maybe we'll talk about as we go in the season. Maybe a Kevin Herter gets floated around, maybe something like that. But as of right now, we're in a better position where we should beat these Lakers, like the Lakers team. We've had their number. I don't see how we couldn't. But then again, we run into this issue of if they do make moves in the trade deadline, then what happens? And then you're facing a whole different team.
Right.
So that's what happened with the Mavericks. The Mavericks, we saw them after the trade deadline, and we had their number early on. But then they were able to take care of business after the trade deadline. That's when they really started getting hot. So it's one of those things to monitor for sure. But getting those Lakers games out of the way early, I think they just, they're seeing the rivalry increase and becoming a much more competitive matchup, even if the Lakers have been taking more of those losses.
Yeah, and another thing that they're seeing happening aside from that is Sacramento is starting to become a fun place to watch a basketball game, whether it be through your television screen or actually going to a Kings game. And that's why we have 7 national TV games. Um, and I think that, look,
I thought we had 12. I know I guess do you count the NBA TV games because
so
those are
that's,
yeah.
yeah, that's the thing is if you do, we do have 12.
Yeah.
But I personally don't. I only count the ESPNs
TNTs.
and TNTs. But yeah, for this case, let's say 12. We're nationally televised 12 times this season because you guys as fans have been loud enough at these arenas and making it so much fun to listen to a Kings game that they're going to put you on the screen that much more. And on top of that, obviously the team has made massive improvements that it's worth putting them on a screen more than once or twice a year. So
Right.
shout out to the Kings fans. Shout out to the Kings organizations. You guys have made it to 12 NBA, 12 nationally televised games now.
It's
It's
true,
only going to
huh?
go up from here. But that's exciting. I do find some excitement in that.
So let's push forward then to the beginning of the new year because I think when we look at this schedule, this is where the Kings, I think, in my personal opinion, where we might start seeing like the make it or break it point of the season to really solidify ourselves in playoff position, right? I think this is where we start seeing the schedule becoming a little bit more difficult. And we'll talk about the end of January, but in the beginning of January, we got Philly, we got Memphis, Golden State, Miami, Boston, and then we have a game against Chicago. I think that's DeMar's first game back in
Mm-hmm.
Chicago. On the 12th of January, but then you got Milwaukee and Houston. When you look at this month alone in January, there's really only, one. I see Washington, I see Brooklyn, Chicago. Those are pretty much the only 3 teams that we could say like we're going to be favorited against. And it's going to be tough. This is going to be a tough prove it stretch for this team, especially as we go from that. I think the toughest stretch here would be from January 22nd, where we got this game against Golden State. After that, we go on our one of our 2 6-game road trips here.
Mm-hmm.
And to make it, to make matters worse, so let's go from this in general. So you see the Golden State Warriors game that's on ESPN. It's going to be great. It's going to be hype. We're going to dominate them. It's going to be great. And then we go on the road to Denver on the second night of a back-to-back, then fly all the way across the East Coast to New York to play the Knicks. Then we get one breather game. I mean, you never know with those kind of games with the Kings. Hopefully, we're beating the opponents we should in Brooklyn. And then we go to Philly, and then we get a couple of days off, but then you go on the road again to OKC, and then you finish the road trip in Minnesota. And then you come home and play Orlando. Like those, that's a
Yeah.
tough stretch to have to fight through. And if we're winning, you know, if we win at least 4 or 5 of these games, I think we're going to be in a really important position, considering if you look just a little bit lower, I see 3 sandwiched matchups there with our favorite team right now, the New Orleans Pelicans.
Yep.
And we don't want to be coming off of losing 6 out of these 7, 8 games that we have here, and then we have to try to win 3 games against New Orleans and 1 against Dallas, and that's a tough ask if you're in a losing spot. So for you, Ben, do you think that this would probably be one of our most important stretches in terms of,
Absolutely.
yeah.
Absolutely. This is up there with one of the most important, if not the most important, stretch. Just because you're looking at the teams that you're playing, right? This is not going to be an easy stretch. This is the point in the year rather where you're trying to position yourself as a team, and when you're fighting for position on that leaderboard, and you've got to play Denver and New York and Philadelphia and OKC and Minnesota, and then you come home and play Orlando, and then you see our favorite team, New Orleans, 3 times in a week span.
Crazy.
That's tough, man. That's a really tough schedule. And then we get that little break, and then we're back to playing Golden State, which is always going to be a tough matchup, whether they're complete trash or not, because as long as Steph is on the other side of that, that's a guy you've got to chase around the court. So this is indeed a very vital stretch for the Kings. They do have, like you said, there's two 6-game road trips. I think the first one is earlier on in the season. I think we kind of went past that.
Let me double check just to make sure, because we got this one, 2, 3, 4 early on. Then we got 1, 2. No, I actually think it's later. I think
Is
it's
it
at the end of the
later?
season.
Oh
Yeah,
my
I think
goodness!
we're about to stumble upon it. So I think, yeah, it's at the back half of the season. So
Wow.
so that
So
makes it tough.
both of these 6-game stretches are at the end of our season, where legs are going to be tired. Like, guys could be battling injuries. There's going to be little ticky tacky things that everyone's dealing with, right? It's not like they're not playing a sport all year long. This is a tough stretch. This makes it even more important that the Kings do some damage early on. Like, they have to start the season hot,
Yeah.
hot, hot.
And then when we look at the end of that, we do get a little breather. I mean, I think we're in a position now where we can say that we can beat this Golden State team, even though they're going to look different. It's not going to be that big of a deal. Then we got Charlotte and Utah, and then Houston, Dallas, Denver, San Antonio, the Clippers. We go into March, and this is a month that is going, man, it's tough. Like, I look at this
It
schedule,
is.
and it all just looks tough. And that's the problem. I'm sure like other teams are feeling the same way, but it's just, when I look at it, I'm like, man, there's a lot of games that we can't throw away. There's a lot of games that we're going to have to fight through. And again, just looking at it sucks. But I also, like, in my own head, I have more confidence in this team than maybe I'm projecting right now. Um, and maybe part of that's like past emotions from seeing, the back to backs. Because when you look at the month of March, we got 4 back to backs sandwiched in here.
Mhm.
So that's also going to be a make it or break it month, just in terms of having to survive and continue to climb up the standings. And like you said, we're jostling for playoff positioning here. This stretch between, the end of January to the month of March is going to make or break our whole season and will be the difference of whether we're playoff or play in or even in the playoffs. But I mean, I don't think it's, that going to go that dire. But
Yeah, man, March is going to be so hard. Like
mhm.
that's to have the 4 back-to-backs in there and coming off of already a tough February. That's
And look at
it's
these
good.
backs. Look at these back to backs, dude. We
I
got the
know.
Clippers at New York, and then Golden State to Phoenix, and then Boston to OKC. Like that's, oh my goodness, that's gonna be fun.
Yeah. So, you mentioned earlier the scroll back up. It was somewhere we were playing and then going to New York.
Right here, Denver to New York.
Yeah, Denver to New York, complete cross country travel. I want to
Hmm.
highlight real quick that the Kings are traveling the third most miles out of everybody this year, and that sucks.
Yeah. Do you
Like,
think? Do you think that's a product of just being a West Coast team and just being all the way on the one side versus being towards the middle?
absolutely, it makes complete sense, right? Except for the fact that the Lakers are 11th. Do I need to use that F word again? Because I
Okay.
can. I will. It's
Go for it.
That's the frustrating part is the favoritism that we continue to see with the Lakers. The fact that all the so if I'm understanding this right, we are the let me actually pull it up. So by miles, so we're third, right? Golden
Hmm.
State is fourth.
Okay.
Clippers are fifth.
I see a
And
lot of our
then
division in there.
yep.
Okay.
And then all of a sudden the Lakers fall all the way back there to 11th,
Hmm.
which is a whole 5,000 less miles basically.
That's basically a
Four
whole
thousand
road
less than
trip
us.
less.
Yeah. So that's frustrating. But the amount of travel, it could definitely take a toll on it on the Kings this year. We're gonna we're gonna see some stretches this year where the Kings really have to like pull everything out that they can. Like
Hmm.
it's gonna get to a point where we could see some 3-4 game losing streaks, and it's like you guys just have to get a win again so that we can get this thing back on track. I'm hoping that's not the case, but there are
Hmm.
so many back to backs lumped in there into 1 month in certain months that it's like you can't help but think like there could be stretches of some big losses in there.
Yeah, and then to finish off, because this is going to be a great point, we're going to talk about which stretches are going to be the most important. So let's finish off when we finish off the month of March. This is the start of our final 6 game road trip where we go all the way across the east. So we're playing Orlando and then Indiana. Then we got Washington and Charlotte. Those would be at this point of the season will probably be the two most important must-win games for us in terms of positioning ourselves. And then you got a back-to-back against Cleveland and Detroit. Then we got Denver, the Clippers, and Phoenix. So when you look at the very end of the season, there's 4 games realistically, the Washington, Charlotte, Detroit, and the Clippers, where that might be the difference for us. That we could win if we win those 4 and then set ourselves up with a win against either one of those final 3 teams, Cleveland, Denver, or Phoenix. That might be the difference of us securing a top 6 spot.
Definitely, but on the other side of that, we do play Denver and Phoenix. Luckily, it's at home, but at the butt end of it, you've got some superstars who have been in these positions before who could very well be positioning themselves at the later stages of the season where I mean this could be some prime time matchups that could swing things one way or another.
Mm-hmm. So let's move on real quick to the stretches. So Ben, you told me beforehand that you have 5 stretches this season that are going to be that you viewed as the most important. So let's hear them. What do you think?
So it starts with the first game of the season and it rolls through those first 7 games. To start hot, that's going to be massively important to the success early on for this team. I think you really have to take care of the small home court advantage that you do have, and you have to make some noise early on and find that confidence. Now, getting into the next stretch of things, that December to January, you're at home for the holidays, man. Take care of home court advantage because if you take care of home court this season, you are for sure a top 6 seed. At that point, if you were to win, let's say 80% of your home games, you're probably a top 3 seed and then we're talking.
Right.
So take care of home court during December and January for sure. The next one I'm going to get into is the 6-game road trips, and I'm gonna actually end with those because I think it's massively important that on those 6-game road trips you have to at least go 500, like
For sure.
to, and you might even have to do better if you haven't been taking care of home court advantage. That's what happened last year. Was they didn't win the games they were supposed to, and they didn't win the home court games. And so then at the later stage of the season where we're without Kevin Herter, without Malik Monk, and someone's got a banged up whatever's going on, you now have to win this game, and you have to go into their house and do it. When beforehand, if you'd have just taken care of the games you needed to, you probably could have gotten out of there with a loss and been okay.
Yeah.
So those are like the major stretches for me. And then actually I will add one more, and it's going to be what we just talked about, that March, April stretch. I think if by that time you're moving and grooving and this Kings team is healthy and what we expect it to be, make some damn noise, because
Hmm.
this is the stretch where you position yourself. This is where the top dogs take over as top dogs, and this is where the frauds fall to the frauds. So this is a massive stretch, and this is a massive season for them.
Right. So I agree with everything you said there. So we'll get off the schedule here, and then now we're just gonna have a conversation because we've talked about this team so many times over the past few years in terms of just what the expectations are, because they've set these expectations for themselves now. And with the additions that we've made, not just with DeMar DeRozan and Devin Carter, Jordan McLaughlin, like there's an emphasis here to improve our depth and to make this team better. We've talked about last year with one of the main goals, one of the main things we were hoping for was to make it to the playoffs and win a playoff series. Now, we didn't make it that far, but we did exercise a demon in the Warriors. And but that's still, we lost two more games than we lost two more games than we lost the year before with 46. So the Kings win total is at 46 and a half. And we mentioned in our instant reaction for the DeMar trade that with DeMar, with this veteran presence that I think is still going kind of under the radar. I think people just don't think that because we're the Kings and he's joining the Kings, that it's not really that big of a deal. But he could be the reason that we elevate ourselves to 50 wins. And I think if you watch any other podcast that involves the Kings, that is Kings centric, I should say, um, the consensus goal around the city is this is a team that's capable of winning 50 games. How 46 and a half, I feel like we both have the same answer, but do you think that we're going to go over this year because we were at 46 last year? Do you think we're going to be a 50 win team? And for you, what do you think some of the keys are to being a 50 win team this season?
It's a great question. You kind of said it best, because the number for everybody that's been put out there for the Kings rather has been that 47 number now. Us Kings fans, us, podcasters, we don't agree with that. It's 50 wins. And I think that it's a really good chance that the Sacramento Kings get over 50 wins this year. You're coming into the season with a guy who you never expected to be a Sacramento King in DeMar DeRozan. And that in and of itself should be giving this team a lot of motivation. I saw videos of DeMar and Domas already in the kitchen. Like they're working together. They're working on that DHO. And it's looking nice. I'm excited for it. So 50 wins, yeah, the Sacramento Kings get it. What are the keys to it? Free throws. Last year, the Sacramento Kings shot a NBA low 74.8%. Okay. You're bringing in a veteran in DeMar DeRozan who is a great free throw shooter. Rely on him. That means don't put the ball in the clutch times when they're going to foul you. Don't put it in Foxy's hands. It's not that I don't trust Foxy. Don't put it in Domas's hands. It's not that I don't trust Domas, but it's like, know who your strengths are at this point. And with free throws on the line, how many times last year I saw 3 games slip out of the Kings' hands because they couldn't make their free throws when they were winning, and it came down to the foul game.
Yeah.
And I just can't help but think, about how many other games there could have been if they knocked down their free throws throughout the entire game. How many more could they have won? So free throws are going to be massive this year. The next thing is protect that home court, man. You are playing in front of the best fans in the NBA, in the world, all right?
Hell yeah.
Probably not the world, but in the NBA for sure. And we are going to be backing you guys every single game. You have to take care of that home court. It is so vital, especially to the success all year long. Like we look at some of these road stretches, we look at some of these later months in the season, and it's going to be tough. It's going to be really hard. So to be able to protect that home court and win the games you're supposed to, it's only going to give you that much more of a cushion when you might need it in the future.
Yeah.
So that's massive. The last thing that one more thing that leads into my last point is consistency. Oh my gosh, how many times did we come on here last year and we were talking about, well, we're just not, we're not consistently doing the certain things right, and then we're consistently doing the bad things.
Yeah.
That needs to flip. Like, we need to be a consistent ball team when it comes to the good things, winning, whatever it takes to win games. You have to continue to do that all year long. You have to find what's working early on, which we trust Mike. That's why they just signed an extension on him. Like, they trust him to take the reins of this team, find that consistency, find the winning culture, and run with that. So find that consistency early on. What consistency does is builds my last point, which is confidence. This team needs to be confident out the gates. If this team is confident, 60 wins is insane, but it's a number that they could achieve if absolutely everything is clicking and some things go their way.
Mm-hmm.
But those are like the 5 keys for me going into this season that I'm looking at these massive stretches and this whole season, which doesn't look favorable for the Kings. But I'm like, no, man, it is favorable in some ways. You just got to take care of what you can control. And what you can control, you've got things going for you right now. So it's going to be a good season.
I also think just what a lot of teams like to do, and we are in this boat, is bank on self-improvement as well. We went out of our way to improve with different players. Now we added a lot of veteran talent, but we also are banking on these young guys, right? We need Keon Ellis to continue that form that he finished not only at the end of last year, but during Summer League, he looked fantastic. We need Keegan Murray to take another step. Does it have to be this crazy high step? No, DeMar mitigates that a little bit, but Keegan needs to continue to expand his offensive arsenal and be just a little bit more consistent. And I think with those pieces on top of DeMar, we have the recipe to kind of really take that next step as a team, and 50 wins seems achievable. And, now we have the triple D over here with De'Aaron, Domas, and DeMar. We need those guys to really just be the leaders of this team and continue. They need to be the most consistent of the group. And, I think with all 3 of those guys together, they will balance each other out on nights where if one guy's bad, or maybe even 2 guys is bad, we have that third guy who can help us, right the ship. And with, if Keon comes out here and he shows us a little bit of that shooting touch that he did during Summer League, there's going to be a case for him to maybe that might switch. And this is going to sound weird, but it might put the Kings in a position where maybe they feel comfortable enough to start Malik, knowing that they have Keon coming off the bench who can get hot. And maybe that makes Monk happier. Maybe that makes this whole team play a little differently. Or maybe they just can rely on Keon early on and rest Fox earlier, something like that. If these young guys can come out right away and make an impact, and again, we're talking young guys. I know Devin Carter's a huge part of it, but he's coming off of a major injury, major surgery. And depending on where this Kings team is at that time of the year, who knows if we're even going to see him next year. And if everything's going good, that pressure might not be, we might not need to put that pressure on him right away. And that's okay. I think, we have enough talent and enough veteran presence to make it work. But man, I see so many ways that this could go right. And those inconsistencies we had last year, I think that we addressed it with DeMar specifically. Just him alone, he's going to take care of a lot of those mistakes that this Kings team's made. and provides us just with a a true 3 level scorer in the most important moments. Him, Fox, and Monk at the end of games is just gonna be pretty freaking deadly.
Yeah,
So
he's another form of reliability and confidence. Like it's just another guy out there who he's been balling his whole life, you know what I mean? And he is a vet in this league and a very well respected vet. One of the best probably mid-range scorers of all time in a lot of ways. And there's I mean, we talked about the swagger that Mike Brown brought to the Kings locker room when he first got here. That kind of there's a swagger that comes with DeMar as well. And it's already kind of rubbed off in that first, summer league or California Classic when he walked out on the court
mhm.
and he was walking out to K Dot and all the fans were hyping him up. It you got the sense of like not a culture change, but a culture shift, like a
Mhm.
little bit of momentum shift. And that's something like you got to ride those kinds of things because early on in the season, that's why I'm saying like if you can kick Minnesota in the mouth early, you can ride that for that early stretch. And if you go 7-0, or you on that through the 11 games, you go 8-3, 7-4, you're looking good.
Mhm.
And then you can keep position yourself till you get to December. And if you're moving, your fans are going to be hyped. And then you've got all that home court advantage through those 2 months. And you can just ride that. And then you're looking at a massive over 500. We're probably looking at like 750. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
it's going to be a good looking record if they can take care of what they need to take care of early.
And I think the common narrative that with DeMar is that, oh, you're bringing in a guy who can't defend. And listen, a part of that might be true. Like he might not be that level of defender, but keep in mind, Harrison Barnes was also not that level of defender.
Right.
And there was I forget who posted it, but it was a Kings writer who posted this stat with that 5 man starting lineup of De'Aaron, Keegan, HB, and Domas was a top 5 defensive unit per 100 possessions. Like they were a dominant defensive team. So you're subbing out Harrison Barnes, and I said this when we got DeMar. You're subbing out Harrison Barnes for DeMar DeRozan, and not only is it at worst a net equal defensively, but then you add just a much more consistent offensive presence, and I just can't see how that's a bad thing or a negative for this team. And it gets me going. Like it makes me confident. I think it's hard to imagine it right now. But then when we're gonna see it right away on the court with DeMar's just gonna fit seamlessly in this offensive system. He's not
I
going to be
agree.
asked to shoot a ton of threes. That's fine. He can create for others too. Foxy, we saw last year. Foxy wanted to take more threes. If DeMar is going to take a little bit more responsibility off of Fox's hands, he might have more catch and shoot threes that he might be able to capitalize on this year. That's a just it's again, it's hard to imagine it, but in the moment, I think when we're going to see game one, we're going to see just the versatility offensively that this team's going to have. And I think if you're featuring Keon and Keegan getting better defensively and stronger, I don't know, man. I think we're more balanced than the national media is giving us credit for.
Oh, absolutely. I think, yeah, it's frustrating from the perspective of what they talk about as defense. And they're like, well, you give up a guy in Harrison Barnes who defends really well. And it's like, okay, look, for a second, I will tell you, Harrison Barnes has been the ultimate professional. I loved him being on the Sacramento Kings. He was fantastic here. Everything he did for the community, the team, awesome. He was not a great defender.
Yeah,
We didn't get worse defensively with him leaving and DeMar coming in. Like that's the part that baffles me. And then if you want to say that Harrison was a better defender, I'll give you that. But I promise you, DeMar is so much better of an offensive weapon than Harrison has ever been in his career. To a point where it's like it doesn't even compare the
yeah,
difference. And so that part of it, like I kind of at this point brush it away. I'm just like, you guys have no idea. I
yeah,
the fit style of things, like I do agree with you. I think he's going to get a large amount of open threes because Fox is still he's very much in his prime. He has just entered his prime in the
yep.
last 2 years. He is very much so there now. He is going to still be the primary ball handler on this team. With that being said, he's going to see doubles because he's still the fastest guy out there. He's probably, in a lot of ways, still the most unguardable on the Sacramento Kings. And so for DeMar, I hope he's working on that 3-point shot because he could if he does work on that this offseason and he sees the kind of looks that we expect him to see, I would not be surprised if he has a career year from the 3-point line.
That's a good take. And, honestly, when I approached that take, I was kind of viewing it in the reverse light, right? Like I thought DeMar would create more looks for De'Aaron, but you're not wrong. There's a very real opportunity that DeMar is going to be a little bit more wide open than he has been the past couple of years because he's not the main guy shouldering the load for this team and receiving all the double teams. It is going to be very much pick your poison. And again, if Keegan steps up his game and becomes more of an ISO guy and able to take a few more looks off the dribble, man, like there's an element to this team where it's going to be like, who are you going to try and stop tonight? And
Mm-hmm.
one of these guys are going to get going, and it's going to be a problem each and every night. So are we going to go back to a little bit of our 2022 reliance on the offense? Maybe, but I think there's an edge to where this team went from 24th in defensive rating to 14th last year. All we've been begging for years is this team to just be a middle of the road defensive team, and the
Yep.
rest will take care of itself. If we carry that momentum, because this team kind of figured out a recipe to defend well, and you're just adding in a couple pieces. It's not like this whole team is a bunch of different players who don't understand the system. You got the guys who can help DeMar understand the system quick. So I don't see a drop off coming. I think there's a legitimate chance that the Kings could be not only a top 10 offense, but a top 10 defense this year. I don't think that's that crazy to say. I think for those who don't watch the Kings and for those who weren't paying attention the last month and a half of the year, they think otherwise. But it was our offense that was the problem last year, not our defense, and our inconsistency from the free throw line, like you said, sloppy turnovers, just lapses offensively that really negated all the defensive effort we were putting in. I think I don't know, man. I'm feeling pretty confident. So if you had to blindly, way too early because we're still a couple months away. If you had to blindly give me a record right now for the Kings, what are you feeling?
Well, I'm not good at quick maths, so I'll give you a win total.
Okay.
Um, I think 54.
Yeah,
I think
I could
I
see
think
that.
54 wins is probably within within reason for this team. I think that they're going to run into some walls this year, like we talked about. They're going to find some games where certain back to backs, certain road stretches are just they're going to take their beating, and it's going to be what it is. But I think they'll find their shoes again. They'll find their footing, and they'll get the wins they need to. And I think that 50 win conversation will be out the window. They'll make the first round of the playoffs, and the goal obviously is not only 50 wins; it's to win your first playoff series in years.
Yeah.
So I think they do that as well, and I think that I don't want to say what their ceiling is in terms of the playoffs, but I do want to say that they make it through the first round.
And that again, 50 wins plus a series win kind of has to be the goal. I think fans would view this as a disappointment. Like, yeah, we'll get 50 wins. That'll be that's one step. But if we don't win a series, if we match up against, I'm not gonna, you know what, I'm not even gonna throw a matchup out there. But if we lose our first round series, that's gonna be a disappointment because we've already been there before. We've scratched the surface. How much more do we have to scratch before we take the next step?
Yeah,
And
I would argue that it's a worse thing if you get 50 wins and don't advance through the first round. I would argue like I would rather have 43 wins, squeak into the playoffs, and win that matchup.
yeah, exactly. You want the series wins is what matters because we saw teams bounce back from the eighth seed and make it all the way to the finals, and that's more satisfying. The regular season at that point is redundant, so it's winning a series. That's that's the goal, the ultimate goal, and DeMar can help that. The additions that Monty made in the offseason and retaining Malik Monk will help that. And one thing that might come to bite us in the butt might be our center depth and our big man depth. That's something we might need to address in the middle of the season. But we're also in a position where we can address it. but we also have a lot of versatility on this roster. And I think that we're going to regress to the mean in terms of our offensive selves. We're going to come back and we're going to be a lot less streaky offensively. And I think our defensive consistency is going to be a talking point this season. I think we're going to surprise some people.
I agree. I will speak on that backup center real quick. I really want Mike Brown to utilize Alex Len more because
Mm-hmm.
I haven't seen a stretch where the Kings use Alex where I'm like, why is he out here? Like, there's sequences where it's like, damn, I miss Domas. You know what I mean? But it's like, it's at the same time, obviously he's not Domas. And obviously that game's going to look a lot different when Domas is out of the game. That's why Domas is an all NBA and should have been all star, but that's not a conversation.
Right.
Um, it's, I want to see more Alex Len because at that point, if you're playing him more, I don't think we have as big of a backup center problem at that point. He tends to stay relatively healthy. He has his impact on the game. He knows what he's good at. He kind of reminds me of Rashawn Holmes, where he's like he plays into his strengths. He doesn't play the weaknesses necessarily. And if you can kind of utilize that and utilize what you have in him out there and run plays according to what his strengths are, he could be awesome.
No, I agree. There was plenty of times last year where I was like, okay, I can handle 7 minutes of Alex Len or, 10 to 15 minutes of Alex Len per game. Um,
Yeah.
And especially now with who we're surrounding him with, all this guard talent we have, it can make up for that in terms of the offensive punch we need. We just need a big man who can defend and hustle on the boards, which he does. So
Yeah.
I agree. And, but I guess my concern would be if for some reason, something does happen, then we're going to be stretched a little thin. And I know we signed Orlando Robinson, but I don't know. He's an unknown and you don't really know. So we don't have a JaVale McGee like we did last year, third kind of guy. Like point guard wise or guard wise, we have that in Jordan McLaughlin. And in terms of he's our Davion, in terms of he could be the backup point guard if need be in a pinch. And so those are things we can talk about as the season gets closer because I'm sure, moves can be made, free agents can be signed, or if that's a topic of conversation in the, trade deadline, then that's something we can explore there too. So, I think it was more important because of the consistency that Domas provides and the inconsistency from our guard play and the injuries there, we needed to stack up a little bit there too. And I think we did a good job. I think Monty really set this team up for success this year.
I fully agree. So it's a loaded Western Conference. It's a loaded league.
Mm-hmm.
But this Sacramento Kings team can absolutely make some noise. It just comes down to exactly what we just talked about. It's the confidence, it's the consistency, it's the winning basketball plays, winning basketball attitude. Like, if this team brings that, 50 wins is just the bottom level for them, honestly. It's the base level.
Mm-hmm.
From there, it's just a building block. Like, this team has got a really good foundation built for the next 4 or 5 years. Yes. And if you can run with that and start it hot with this season, getting that 50 wins, getting a playoff win, a series win, dude, that's going to be massive going into next year.
Yeah. No, agreed. And I didn't say a win total last year or for this season, but I do think I agree with you that 54 is probably going to be, if everything goes the way that we're hoping for, that we'll probably see that be the, maybe no, I'm not going to say ceiling, but that could be that's like a comfortable spot for us. I'm just excited for this season because there's a lot to prove all over the place, and there's been a lot of new faces on a lot of new teams. So I think the main takeaway for me is that this team is underrated again, like even more so than because we were generating buzz in 22, when we took the Warriors to 7, and then last year, even when we beat the Warriors, people were like, "Oh, the Warriors were washed," and I understand that argument, but they're sleeping on us even more so this year, and I'm okay with that. I want that target's not on our back anymore the way it was, and we get to go out there and prove everyone wrong, and I think this team is more than capable of doing so.
Yeah, keep sleeping, and then keep that same energy when we run your team into the dirt.
Exactly. So I think we're doing pretty good here. Did you have any final thoughts before we head out here?
I'm getting hyped, but there's still 2 months left until the regular season starts.
I know.
I think October 9th is the first preseason game.
Mm.
And then obviously October 24th or 26th
24th.
is the season opener.
Yeah,
So much time, man. But at least we got some football coming up.
I know. And hopefully next week. So next week we're going to actually talk about who our sleeper team, our behind the back podcast team will be for the season. The team that we is slated to miss the playoffs, but we think might actually surprise some people. So we'll talk about that next week, and we'll probably take a break off of Kings unless we hear some big news or something like that, because we got time. This was probably our last chance to really talk about the schedule and do some digging and see what was really important before the season starts. So we're excited for the NBA, but we got to put on our NFL caps to move forward now. So I'm excited for that. All right. So this was episode 54 of the Behind the Back podcast. You can hit us up at behindthebackpod13@gmail.com or hit us up on any of our social medias that are located above. For all you audio listeners out there, they are located below all the links in the description. So please feel free to like, subscribe, give us a comment, give us a follow, help us grow this show. We love it. Again, I say it every week, but we're seeing more and more comments. We love what we're seeing, and we're appreciating all the love that we receive from you guys. And we hope that this season NFL and NBA is going to be even bigger and better than before. We got a lot of stuff planned. So I am Marcos Conan Negron. Beside me here, as always, is
Benny the Jet.
All right, y'all. We love y'all. We will talk to you next week. Peace.
Peace.